Welcome to Letters from Norway, offering an American perspective from Oslo, with your host, Nick Cameron.
All right, so now we're starting into part 2. So if you were listening last week, I'm sure you're just dying to get to this section. We only have the resources, unfortunately, to do just one podcast a week. One podcast, roughly 20 to 35 minutes. Somewhere in there. So 35 is a very long podcast. We generally like to keep them around 20 to 25 minutes long. But now in this section, in the part 2 of this healthcare, Let's Make America Hot Again section, we'll talk about the main culprits. There was a time 50 years ago when Americans were considered good-looking and fit people. Every American looked good. I mean, it wasn't just on TV. I grew up in the 70s, and, I remember, my parents and everybody was in, good shape. Everyone was walking, everybody was eating right, and it showed. And there was always these terms of endearment you would hear, to compliment people. I was growing up in Minnesota when I was young, kind of in a little bit of a countryside situation. So you'd always hear this term that someone is country strong, or a Southern belle, someone from the South, like Tennessee, as a way to describe our people as, very fit and good looking. So what happened? What happened to the American South? That used to be like a source of really good looking girls. And now it's like all obesity down there. And nobody lives in the country anymore. So you don't hear that term country strong, anymore. So, what happened? So listen carefully in this section. It could change your life. Back in 2013, after I got yelled at by my Vietnamese doctor, the one who was probably holding John McCain hostage or something like that, it came down to this. She told me there's 4 whites, and this is not white people, but there's 4 white foods that were the main cause of my poor health and well-being. She said flour, anything made from white flour, like pasta, bread, spaghetti, all of these products that originate from white flour, she said to get rid of that. It doesn't really do anything for you. It's just starch and empty calories. So I cut that out. I was eating a lot of bread, bagels, raviolis, all kinds of stuff. So that was a big change. And then sugar. And she said sugar was in everything and that I should read all the labels and really get my sugar down to less than 20 grams a day. It would really take a lot of work. And she said sugar was in, in all the sauces, barbecue sauce. It was everywhere. It was not just in pop and cake. It was even in like French fries at McDonald's. You can't get away from it. The third culprit was salt. That's also everywhere. It's mostly in frozen foods. So it came down to this: don't ever reheat anything, and be very careful when you buy any kind of food that's been processed or packaged. It's always got a ton of salt in there. It's a preservative. So I just stopped buying anything that was in a package, except for, sometimes they have apples in a package or broccoli in a package, but, basically it wasn't processed. You get the idea. So like beef jerky, that was out, and a lot of, even breads, have a lot of salt in it. And then the other one I didn't think about so much, but I was eating a lot of, was white rice. She said, the bleaching process and the whole process to make white rice is very bad. It takes all the nutrition out, and those chemicals could even put a strain on your body to get that rice polished. So I opted for brown and wild rice. It has a lot more nutrition. Like the rice that the Native Americans eat. It's like really black. And it's got like a husk on it, and it takes a long time to cook. So I started eating that, and it's really expensive, but it's well worth it. I mean, it's way more expensive than white rice. So the bottom line is this: the less processed the food, the better. The chemicals associated with refining foods, perhaps some effects that are unbeknownst to us. They don't ever talk about it or publish it. This food industry has got a lot of power to fund counter studies or repress studies. That's just my opinion. I mean, I'm just speculating. It's not a fact. I don't know. Could be, but it almost appears they have like some superpowers, and they can, get us to eat crap basically, That's my opinion about the food industry. So after 3 months of totally going to war on flour, sugar, salt, and white rice, and I combined this with some light exercises, I started getting abs. It was crazy. I had to get smaller pants. I had to go down from a 36 to a 33, 32-inch waist. It hadn't been like that since high school. I was getting muscle definition. It's really true. And you don't need to pay a whole lot of money for those guys on YouTube, selling these programs. It's really just that. Cut out the flour, sugar, salt, white rice, and start eating natural food. Just force yourself to do it. The first 21 days is hard. But then after that, it almost becomes habit, and you're craving this because it's full of nutrients, and your body is starting to crave proper nutrients once again. So what does this make me conclude? After having this experience in Norway, being like mostly an anti-tax, anti-government American, this is one thing we need to do. We need to tax processed and refined foods. We need to drive the public towards better food choices. I break from most conservatives on this one, but I see obesity, diabetes, and depression as a national crisis. It's a risk to our sovereignty of our country. It's basically when people have these afflictions, it kills their spirit from inside. These people are dying from inside. They're dying spiritually, and America needs spiritual people who feel this power of being American. But when you have like layers of blubber around you and you feel like crap, you lose that vigor for your nation. We're like a frontier country where you have to be like physically strong and physically able. And when your body is strong, your mind is strong. So, I have to say, I agree with Michael Bloomberg on soda and sugar taxes. I agree with him on printing the calories on the menu. We have to have some regulation here. We're fighting against a very powerful industry. So what am I eating these days? I'll tell you a little bit about my diet and exercise regimen here for the next couple minutes, and then I will refer you to my blog and show notes on this because it's quite extensive, but there's no surprises. I can just cover the highlights right now. I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of cod. There's another one called scree. I don't know how to quite pronounce it, but I'll put it up on the show notes. It's a white fish. I eat a lot of trout, which is called ore in Norwegian, and then I eat a lot of salmon, which is called laks in Norwegian. So I have eat 4 or 5 different varieties of fish throughout the week. I eat turkey instead of chicken. The turkey is a little bit more leaner. I eat a ton of potatoes. Potatoes are actually quite okay. It comes from the ground. It's not processed, although it's like white in color. The red potatoes and the Idaho, those big Idaho potatoes are really good. But you got to eat the skin. You gotta eat everything. You can't just eat the inside. The skin contains a ton of nutrition. And I eat a ton of wild rice. I have a rice cooker. It makes it easier to cook. And so that's kind of the mainstay of my diet. As far as vegetables go, when I eat raw vegetables, it gives my stomach a lot of trouble. So I generally put them in the blender and make a smoothie out of them. And it's a lot easier to digest, but it still has all the fibers. It hasn't been put through a lot of machinery. It's just been chopped up so that it's easier to chew on. It's like a surface area thing. So the more surfaces of the food that are exposed to the stomach acids, the quicker and better it digests. So I do some chopping of the vegetables to make it easier to stomach because it's got a lot of cellulose and stuff in there. Now, as far as exercises go, I do several core exercises in the morning. And it's not yoga, it's core, okay? And I don't really see a need for a gym membership, but it's roughly 5 or 6 exercises I do in the morning. It's just squats with a backpack with weights in it, toe lifts, a bunch of push-ups and planks, and there's a few others like chair dips. Every now and then I go out to the park nearby and do some pull-ups and do some dips on the dip bar. But nothing more than that, nothing more than like 30 minutes every day, of that kind of morning workout. And that's just to get you awake and, get your muscles all tightened up. Instead of running, I use what's called a Nordic track. It's a ski machine that simulates cross-country skiing. For those of you who are in your 40s, you probably know what these are. They were really huge back in the 80s and 90s. Everybody was trying to get one of these. They were in every mall in America, but the company, I don't know what happened to it. It just died off. I actually used to sell them. I used to actually sell them in the mall. I used to have to stand and ski on these, but I'd grown up cross country skiing all my life, so I think that's why they liked me to sell these machines. But you get a hell of a workout without jamming your joints, and it takes a little bit of an investment of time to learn this machine. But once you invest that time and get your balance, there's nothing like it. And again, I'll put this on the show notes so you can get more information on Nordic Tracks. And the real hack here is you can go on Craigslist, because there's a lot of people who bought these and gave up on them. And they're selling like a $600 or $900 machine for $50 or $100, and it's only been used like 3 times. And there's a lot of them on Craigslist in all kinds of cities all over the US. So you don't need any expensive gym memberships, and you don't need any of that. You don't need any videos. It's actually better just to work out in silence in the morning. And then the next thing I do is I take quite a few vitamins. I'm allergic to milk, so I keep the calcium high. I have magnesium supplements, and I have a few others. I'll put them on the show notes as well. There's a few exotic vitamins out there like vitamin K2, and there's like some fish oils and stuff. And I think they make a difference. It's very debatable, but maybe even the placebo effect, even just feeling good, can have a big effect on your life. Okay, to wrap up, to conclude this story here, or get to the conclusion here, I really want to counter these libertarian arguments about government control and government telling people what to do. I would advise anyone who disagrees with me to read this book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's a story about 1900s Chicago and the abuses of the food industry, not only abusing the employees, but also the trust of the people. And I remember reading this book back in high school. We were reading it in class, and we all had to read out loud one section. And I read a section, there was a passage about the guy had to clean the drain out every night. It was all the animal parts that got stuck in the drain, and they would clean these drains out at night, and then they would take these animal parts and pieces and, run it through a grinder and then can it and sell it to the people as meat, like kind of a spam product. And that really stuck to me, that, when no one is looking and they have the trust of the people, they have a brand, they have some, animated brand or something like that, and a picture of a farm on their package. People put a lot of trust in these companies, and then they try to make an extra nickel if they can. So, if you're some sort of libertarian and you don't think we need government in the food industry, read this book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's a good one. And until this day, big food is like CNN. It just has overwhelming power with the media. They advertise and they bombard us. It's like privatized propaganda. Instead of the government brainwashing us, it's been put into the private sector. And it's just like and they're like Scientologists. If you oppose them or try to call them out directly, they'll sue you. I mean, McDonald's has been known for suing people even if it's a losing case, just because they know the legal costs will hurt that person, who's making statements, that they can just drag them through the courts and get them into a situation where they have to defend themselves at great expense. So it's like, yes, they may lose the battle, but they end up winning the war because it's like an attrition thing. They can just keep delaying and stretching and throw high-powered lawyers at really common average Joe people. And I think there's several movies about this. There's several people who've tried to go up against McDonald's. I mean, the Super Size Me guy got away with it because he did it very scientifically, but there was this couple in England who'd been dragged through the mud for the most part, and they ended up getting a verdict against them for like $1 for making all these documentaries, but they spent years in the courts. So this really comes down to, what is the purpose of government? Well, we have to remember, we the people created governments, to delegate responsibilities so we could focus on what we're good at. We can't, know everything all the time. This is kind of what the libertarian paradigm expects of us, that everyone has to know everything. So we've created governments and societies to delegate responsibility to people of trust. And that's kind of where the breakdown is happening. The government, and the military generally have to protect us from both enemies, foreign and domestic. So one of the tenets under that is they should secure the food and water supplies. This is something so core to our living. And this is something, even if we're living in a small community, if we were just in a community of 6,000 people and, sitting at a town hall, this would be one of the top discussions. If that was the whole system, if we were closed off from the world and there was just 6,000 of us trying to figure out how to make this little village go that was isolated from the world, one of the top topics of conversation would be food and water supply. And here in Norway, interestingly enough, the tap water is cleaner than Evian. It's so clean that this is the only country in the world where Coca-Cola doesn't even filter the water before making pop out of it. Every other country in the world, even in Sweden, Coca-Cola filters the water, but here in Norway, they don't filter it. They just straight up mix it up with the sugars and bottle it. And Norwegian water sells for a fortune in New York. The Voss water and some of these other waters, they're like fashion in America. So, the government, it's supposed to do antitrust, and it's supposed to ensure free flow of information and a competitive marketplace. There's supposed to be competition in the marketplace. So we don't see the government doing any of these responsibilities. They're doing, I don't know what they're doing, but this is actually one of the core things they should be doing in addition to delivering the mail, is making sure that we have clean food to eat and pure drinking water. As I said, the government is just an extension of us, we the people. And it's supposed to act as a counterforce to these monopolies and oligarchs, these people who've amassed so much power. It's supposed to be a collective of us to push against these private powers. The food that we eat has been engineered to be addictive. So these libertarians will argue that people can eat what they want. I mean, that's like, sure, people can go do all the drugs they want because the food has been engineered to be that way. It's right mixtures of salt, sugar, and fat, make you, want to crave it more, and makes you more hungry the more you eat. I'm sure all of you have eaten Chinese food, and, in America, that cheap Chinese food, and after you finish it, you're all of a sudden hungry again. They put stuff in there. I don't know. It's just my opinion. But I believe that. And when I went back to the U.S., I could feel it because my body's been so clean in Norway. And then when I went back to the U.S. and started eating that conventional food, you could almost feel something was in there. So these food industries, they have, the restaurant lobby and General Foods, General Mills, Kellogg's, they have huge powers, huge lobby powers, Nestle Foods, Unilever, Procter & Gamble. I mean, these are incredibly powerful companies. And some of them were even owned by tobacco companies, like Altria Group owns a bunch of food labels. Well, they also own Philip Morris. So don't you think they would put those tobacco scientists who made cigarettes addictive, and that was proven in the lawsuits that they intentionally made the cigarettes more addictive by putting additional chemicals in there to make you crave them more, that they were fooling around with the food too? So yes, we need a very minimal government, but this is definitely one of the situations where we need that minimal government to act. Okay, so wrapping up this healthcare episode. As I said, in my opinion, to fix this healthcare crisis, we really just have to ask ourselves what's making us sick. And as I've said, and I'll reiterate, it's the food. If people eat right, we could probably cut the doctor visits down by 2/3, and then the market forces of supply and demand would take care of the rest. Health insurance prices would drop, doctors would have extra capacity, they might even have sales. So this is where we need regulation. We do need to tax crappy food and sugary beverages. It's just the right thing to do. This is where we need some Scandinavian socialism in America. I'm sure there's some crack users in jail who wish their parents intervened, telling them that they should probably eat their vegetables and do something more constructive than, using crack, which was like cheap and easy or easy to do. It's just like teenagers in the hood with drug culture. It's hard for everyday people on their own to resist the bling presented by the food industry. They're constantly bombarding us with advertisements and engineered flavors and scents that play on our psychology. Based on this health crisis we're having in America, with like 2/3 of the people overweight, and 1/3 that are very obese, it's really true. America is just running on 1/3 of its potential, and we're leading the world. Just imagine if every American was healthy and they had the state of mind that went with being healthy, being in the, having the right weight and having a fit body. we'd be running on 4/3 of our capacity. We would just have so much power as a people, just like we did, after the war, even before the war. America always was a power, and it was something like an inner strength of every American. So the final thought here is that, in closing thought here, is that health is our wealth. We are what we eat. This is a crisis, and we have to address it, and it needs to be the government taking on the food industry, because the government is us. Now, I would like to thank everyone for joining this podcast, and I hope that you can like us on social media and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, and we hope to be seeing more of you soon. Thank you, and have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and follow us on social media.